So this has been an insane week for Dungeons & Dragons and the role-playing game hobby. If you're like me and you've been busy learning the way of the samurai because the intrusive thoughts finally won, then you might have missed that Wizards of the Coast have just released the brand new Dungeon Master's Guide from the bowels of their dungeons. And the review embargo of the new book has now been ended. And the result of this has been crazy. There's been huge articles, reviews, previews, lengthy videos, excited chatter, and even ritualized murder in the steam tunnels. However, that's not all, because there's also been some insane allegations made squarely at Wizards of the Coast. And now Chris Perkins, the lead designer of Dungeons & Dragons over at Wizards of the Coast, has now quit the franchise, revealing that the Dungeon Master's Guide will be his last ever D&D book, and he might just be getting replaced by a very familiar face. A very critical face, if you will. A role for one, perhaps? Oh boy, the people complaining about the Mercer effect will not be happy with this one. Now, if you don't know already, the new Dungeon Master's Guide is coming out next month on November 12th, and it is one of 3 books that are making up the brand new Dungeons & Dragons 5.5 6th edition 1D&D 2024 Digital Future Chunky Monkey Feast version of the game. And it has been in the hands of press and influencers for a while now, but it's only this week that they've finally been able to reveal what's actually in the book. And to be honest, I'm excited. I've been anticipating this week for ages. It's similar to how my dad must feel about the biannual evening where my mom tells him to dress up like O.J. Simpson and they go upstairs to wrestle. But ill-fitting leather gloves and problematic shoe polish use aside, there's a lot riding on this new book. Because if we're honest, aside from the obvious problems like people forcing their giantess fetish into the game, or simply not showing up to games at all, which I've personally never understood how that happens. DMs out there, you can buy pretty solid man-sized cages for cheap from Home Depot if you know who to ask. 99.9% of all problems the games face are simply players lacking the confidence to finally dungeon master their very first game, and actually, you know, get the group role-playing in the first place. Plus, the whole Dungeon Master's Guide thing has always just felt like an excuse for Hasbro to con people into buying another needless book. So this week is actually really important for Dungeons & Dragons. Have WotC managed to actually make this book worth getting for prospective Dungeon Masters? And frankly, I was braced to hear bad news this week, but what I didn't expect were the absolutely insane allegations that have been leveled at Wizards of the Coast, and I am now genuinely surprised. More surprised, in fact, than by the idea that robots are going to take over the entire Earth in the near future. I mean, that one just feels inevitable. But I'll be cold in the grave before I ever recognize that I have to answer phone calls made by machines. Luckily, I can avoid an ignoble end thanks to today's sponsor, Incogni. See, the world is increasingly digitizing, and most people don't know this, but lots of businesses hold your details. It's essentially how the modern internet operates, and with near constant data breaches happening every day now, your data is out there with hundreds of different third-party data brokers without your knowledge. And even worse, it's almost impossible to track all these guys down and get your data removed. So that means you get robocalls, spam emails, and worse. But there is a solution with Incogni. Simply sign up with Incogni and tell them what type of data you want removed from the dark side of the internet, and within minutes they'll be sending out requests on your behalf to get your details totally expunged from the lists of third-party brokers, stopping all those spam emails and robocalls right at the source. Incogni have offered me a special deal for viewers of this channel. Simply use the code Dungeons and Discourse, that's Dungeons and Discourse, at the link below and get an absolutely wild 60% off the annual plan. That's at incogni.com/Dungeons and Discourse. So don't delay, check it out. That's an absolutely insane saving, and a massive thanks to Incogni for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so wild allegations meet Wizards of the Coast. Stop me if you've heard this one before. I guess at this stage we should just always be expecting this at all times, like our favorite celebrities' names showing up on another Epstein list. I wonder who the next Epstein's going to be. There's a big gap in the market these days. Anyway, what the hell is going on? Well, first, some good news. Maybe. So far, it seems like the new DM's guide is actually kinda good, or at least it's being received pretty well by reviewers and influencers. Yay! There's a bunch of improvements in the new book over the old one. At the very least, it actually tries to give Dungeon Masters material that will help them understand the bare bone basics of running a game. The first bunch of chapters in the new book are just literally about what a DM does, how to prep a session, and includes a bunch of general advice for Dungeon Masters. And frankly, this is the bare minimum for a book that is ostensibly meant to be a, guide for DMs, but that's good. For a lot of people, this is going to be the very first thing that they ever read when trying to engage with the very concept of running a game of Dungeons and Dragons. And honestly, the 2014 DM's guide was pretty useless at getting DMs prepared. So I'm just happy that this new one even attempts to do anything like this at all. However, that said, there's a lot of tracking sheets in this book, and they feel really wanky, for lack of a better term. They genuinely feel mostly like busy work. For example, this player tracker here encourages the new prospective Dungeon Master to break down their players into motivations that include acting, storytelling, instigating, optimizing. But where the fuck is my Joker cosplay motivation, huh?
I'm the Joker, baby!
Okay, I guess that's just instigating, but still, I hate attempts like this to place players into little boxes. I much prefer man-sized cages, but these types of categories tend to be, in practice, pretty reductive, and they rarely hold up to scrutiny. In my experience, players are constantly changing and evolving what excites them depending on the day and how much Valium they've ingested. This tracker system feels like it was designed by a HR committee, which, admittedly, considering how inappropriate some D&D tables get, maybe there should be a HR department for D&D. Likewise, the included NPC tracker feels like a lot too. I mean, I don't think I've ever really documented this much detail about an NPC. Whatever happened to simply noting Jerry, weird accent, brown hair, serial constipation? I mean, do you need to know much more than that as the DM? I get that for a book, it's hard to communicate that most NPCs are just a vague idea tied to a certain motivation, loyalty, and topped off with a funny accent and weird quirk. Hey, that's just me. But overcomplicating and essentializing them in this tracker will lead to a lot of wasted time for new DMs. Plus, every single NPC is now going to have a big secret because you just can't leave a box like this unfilled. It demands to be filled. So there's about to be a whole lot more evil twins showing up in a lot of D&D games in the future. Overall, these trackers honestly feel like they're going to encourage new DMs to over-prepare for their sessions, something that the D&D community already struggle with. At the very least though, the new book is focused on actually providing tools, which is a far side better than the old one, which was focused on wasting time, I think. Plus, the new book gets bonus points for including this random table of adventure situations. Some of these are actually pretty cool, and I imagine will be useful for those people that feel like they've just been thrust into the DM role because no one else wants to do it, and now they have to come up with a whole context for everyone else to adventure together and have fun. Bonus points for Watsy here on splitting these adventure scenarios based on level. Also, thank you, Chris Perkins. Oh Jesus, thank you! There is actually a segment here on railroading on how DMs should present meaningful choices to the party and be prepared for players to prevent planned events from occurring because they're clever and they're players and they should have agency. I hope there's like a picture in this book somewhere of the DM's campaign plans and it just being on fire. One new element of the book that gives me major pause though is the flagship brand new Bastion system. This is really the only new thing in the book that isn't just an update or simply a tracking sheet. And in theory, I should love this aspect of the book because it's clearly riffing on AEG's Empire or GURPS Baronies, which is a game I've played but apparently was just made up and it doesn't exist, and even Strongholds and Followers by MCDM. And I love all those games, but this Okay, we need to talk about it. This new Bastion thing, it takes up a significant amount of space and focus in the new book, but it's basically just a set of mechanics and another tracking sheet for players. One that is designed to represent a home base or safe space for player characters. Now, importantly, it's not by default shared among the party. Rather, every individual party member will get their very own Bastion. So it feels less like the base in XCOM and more like a class hub in WoW Legion. Except you get to build different facilities in your Bastion, from barracks to theaters. Though you can't build a bathroom, so what the hell is my gong farmer going to do now? And where's my glory hole going to go? You want me to put my glory hole in like the feast hall? That's sick! I cook my gravy in there! But these facilities allow players to perform certain special Bastion actions, like meditate, or brew potions, or cook gravy, or, in my personal homebrew, manufacture angel dust. And random events can happen at Bastions while you're away adventuring, like it can be attacked by enemies, or there can be a fire, or 3 employees can get into shibari-related tryst, or worst of all, those faceless tough guy NPC goons that came bundled with the big muscle man room that grant you +1 strength, they're now unionizing, so you're gonna have to put them down brutally and violently. Otherwise, you're gonna have to pay 1 more gold every week in upkeep, and f that, you're saving up for an observatory. You wanna see the stars! You know, other events, I'm sure. And in my opinion, this whole system is pretty which is a pity because it's a central plank of the new book. But the Bastions, they just feel very inspired by video game RPGs. They're almost like their own little mini-game, and they act more like player housing in an MMORPG. Or, in other words, they feel cosmetic, and that's because they've been designed as a safe refuge that the DM can't really interact with. I mean, they're explicitly designed to not intrude on the adventures of the party or get in the way.
In the Bastion, the player has creative control. The Bastion is not a knife that the DM can use to hurt the player. By design, it's off limits for the Dungeon Master.
But if that's the case, then what's the point in all of this? I mean, personally for me, I don't want a secret hideout. If I'm going to finally own property that isn't a person, I'd rather take over existing outward-facing institutions and structures. Or, in other words, I don't want a Batcave, I want to own Gotham. My god, I just had the chance to play Batman, and I chose to play the fucking Penguin instead. Yeah, maybe I'm just a bad D&D player. Good show though. Plus, there's some other niggles in here too, like DMs are encouraged to use experience as a balancing mechanism, and there doesn't seem to be anything in the book designed to help DMs create and modify encounters on the fly. You know, to encourage them to mix up and transform their own monsters and encounters. So there's good things in here and bad things, and I'll ultimately need to read it myself to really cement my opinions. But overall, impressions online are pretty positive, unless you take these new insane allegations into account. Yeah, we've gotten to them now. See, the gaming website Wargamer have claimed that WotC have stolen the Ark of the Covenant. No, wait, no, that's the Nazis. Nazi, WotC. It's easy to mix up. Wait, did I just say the word Nazi? Okay, yeah, this video just got demonetized immediately, which has been happening to me a lot lately. These cold winter months have been pretty, you know, cold and wintry. So please subscribe or check out my Patreon and help me eat, because my editor is very, very hungry, and I'm not gonna let him eat until he defeats me in a duel, and I own a sword, so, you know, he's bleeding a lot. But the actual insane allegations are that WotC have stolen portions of the new DM's guide, specifically the sections on safety tools. Now, safety tools are weirdly controversial in the RPG hobby. If you don't know about them, they tend to be pretty simple things, designed to facilitate roleplay by making sure that no one at the table gets too uncomfortable or too aroused. So no piss, please. And there's lots of different types of safety tools that have evolved throughout the years, but they all share the same objective: facilitating consent and respect in play. Basically, the stuff that I personally like to keep outside of the bedroom. But then again, I'm a registered sex offender, at least according to the regional government of New South Wales, which I am required by law to tell you now. But only in New South Wales. I'm safe everywhere else. Now, the new DM's guide does indeed suggest 2 specific safety tools that players could use. The first of these is in a You guessed it, another tracking sheet where players can list their hard limits and soft limits for play. A hard limit is something that a player doesn't ever want to show up in a game, like an arachnophobe asking for no spiders to be included, or small boys might ask that no one play a cleric. In contrast, soft limits can be mentioned in play, but with minimal description, more of a fade to black situation. This system has been compared to, and frankly, it is, the lines and veils concept developed by Ron Edwards for the game Sex and Sorcery. Okay, now there's a name I can get behind. WotC have also included another stolen safety tool too, which is basically the X card, which was developed by John Stavropoulos. In the new DM's guide, WotC basically aped this mechanic with their recommendation that if someone is uncomfortable that they do an X-Man sign with their arms, whereas John just had like a card with an X on it that you kind of flip up and show like you're at a bidding process, but for offense. And as a result of the fact that WotC haven't really acknowledged that that's where they've taken these tools from, they've now been accused of deliberately trying to distance themselves from contributions made by other RPG creators in the industry, and obscuring the history of these tools, and not crediting their sources. So personally, I agree that WotC are clearly drawing inspiration from both these tools in the new book. I think that's incontrovertible. But I think that it's a little bit insane to criticize them too heavily for this, because both of these tools are pretty ubiquitous in the role-playing game hobby nowadays. And frankly, we're starting to get into whatever the non-racist version of Chinese whispers is. I've seen dozens and dozens of different games use extremely similar systems, all of them with slight changes here and there, and while I do think that it would be nice to get credits for where they kind of originated in the first place, I do think that it's inevitable that we start to lose the genealogy of these pretty generic tool sets as time goes on. I mean, these were invented in 1999. That's like ages ago, dude. And D&D is late to the party here, but honestly, this is like having to credit Luke Reinhardt for inventing dice in 1971. Safety tools just aren't novel anymore. And speaking of novels, Matt Mercer is now being put in charge of Dungeons and Dragons. Get it? Because Critical Role is scripted, and a script is kind of like a novel, whatever. Welcome to the Mercerverse, baby. Matt Mercer is now in charge. Probably. Maybe. Definitely not. Or definitely maybe, actually. Look, okay, it's not as insane as it sounds. Yes, I'm aware that I'm going to be getting lots of death threats for that spurious claim about Critical Role being scripted like a novel, but at this stage, angry comments are the only things that make me feel anything anymore. See, this week, Chris Perkins, the lead designer at Dungeons & Dragons, made the huge and pretty shocking announcement that he is now quitting Dungeons & Dragons, and though he's contributed to the upcoming starter set and the new monster manual, this new Dungeon Master's Guide will be his final D&D book as lead designer. I guess he finally played a game of Smallville and realized that there's just no more design space left. The best game in the world has already been made. Why even try anymore? But we found out that D&D now needs a new lead designer alongside the revelation that Matt Mercer, as well as some other celebrity dungeon masters, were consulted by WotC and even helped the company write the new book and give advice to the designers, and probably stole some safety tools as well. And I've seen suggestions that this could mean that it could be over for D&D, as Matt Mercer might be getting closer to the company and stepping in to take over the entire franchise. Personally though, I hope that this isn't the case. Not because I dislike Matt Mercer or anything, quite the opposite. I've just been really enjoying Daggerheart as a D&D style alternative game, and I actually like it more than D&D, I think. So I'd prefer to see Matt Mercer and the Critical Role brand really, stay away from D&D and focus their efforts and throw everything behind Daggerheart. Sorry, but not sorry. What can I say? I'm dagger-pilled, as opposed to just my usual pilled. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy to hear that outside DMs were consulted for the new DM's guide, but I hope that Critical Role keep independent and keep doing their own thing, and that they don't get too close. Let's be honest, we probably won't see Matt Mercer take over WotC anytime soon, unless, he threatens to release those pictures of Chris Cox. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below, or tell me to my face and help me keep doing this, because I joke around about it a lot, but I really am getting demonetized, and I can't keep taking out loans. So please support me on Patreon for bonus videos and Discord access and live streams and a wholesome, welcome hobby community that insisted that I make some not safe for work channels that I've never been on and never will go on. And a massive thanks to my patrons, especially CryptoKev. I'll catch y'all next time. Bye bye.